boys, and we are back to make our Week 16 picks/bets against the spread. So let me update everyone on that. As if you've been following along most of the year or during the year, John has been the front runner in regards to spread, record, and the money part aspect. Still is, by the way. So that hasn't changed because once again, if you follow along, he's had a pretty big lead. But record-wise, I'm starting to chip away at it. As last week, John went 8-8. So hey, 500, you take that. Although I had a pretty good week, I went 10-6. I am now only 4 games behind John. John has 105 wins and 119 losses against the spread. I'm at 101 wins and 123 losses. So we're both trying to get to 500, but also John trying to, obviously win this record part. And then money-wise, John, last week you were at plus 120. I went plus 760 in terms of the money. Once again, not real money because we just ain't built like that. John, so overall that led to you being minus 600, so you're still very close to that break-even points. While obviously I'm still behind at minus 2,740. So still got work to do, but last week definitely helped, as this has been the first time I've been under negative 3,000 for quite some time. I'm trying to pull that up. Let's see. It's been since probably since week 6. So literally almost 10 weeks ago. Yeah. It's been a while. So good to get back there, but obviously my work is not done. And nonetheless, we can also, I was trying to before we get into it too, like also fantasy wise, I know we kind of, in case anyone cares, we're in that same dynasty league where John won the survival tournament / in-season tournament, where we want to dub it. We both went to the next round. We're in the semis. We're not facing each other, so hopefully you can take care of business. Hopefully I can take care of business. Hopefully we could just both take care of business, so that get a nice little rematch going in the championship for the whole enchilada.
I feel a little more confident in my matchup than if I had to play who you're playing, but I don't know. Yeah. I still think that our teams might actually do it, because his team is very Miami heavy. So
yeah, and they have Pollard too, so it's like extremely dependent upon that game.
Yeah.
So we'll see. And mine's a little more spread around, although you could say I'm more Rams oriented, as I have Cooper Kupp, Kyren Williams, and then also have Kamara, of course. So a lot rides on that one. And ironically, that's where we're gonna start for Week 16. That is the Thursday night game. We finally have a good one with stakes. Not the best one we could have, but hey, it's much better than what we had last week in that beatdown in Vegas. But anyway, so as always, we're going against the spread, starting with the favorites, which is the LA Rams. They are at home, favored by 4.5 points, hosting the New Orleans Saints. Like we mentioned, for the Saints, they got division and wild card implications. For the Rams, no chance they're going to get their division, I believe, mathematically. So they just have to control what they can in regards to getting in via the wild card. But anyhow, John, who do you have here and for how much?
Short and simple, I'm taking the Rams. They've been on a heater. They've been looking really good. How many times do I have to say that Kyren Williams has really helped kind of put this offense into the right spot where they truly know what they're doing. They have an identity. I believe they've won 5 straight. So they're on a heater. And I don't really see that cooling down at this point. So I wouldn't be shocked if the Rams basically went out all the way until that final game against the Niners. And considering that the Niners are on their schedule, they're definitely going to want to handle the Saints and the Giants here, next week for, the wild card run that they're going to try and make. Because if they do want to make it to that 7th seed, the Saints are a team that they might have to contend with for a potential tiebreaker. So losing this game could mean a lot more down the road than they might like it to, depending on what happens. So this is definitely a crucial one. And like I said, considering the hot streak they're on, I don't think that they're going to cool off in such a meaningful game. So I'm taking the Rams for 100.
And yeah, so by the way, 4 out of the last 5, but it feels like they
Okay.
won 5 straight because that Baltimore game, like they were like, although they lost, it was like
I
a
forgot they
win.
lost that one. Yeah, and they had it too. Like they had the win, and then the fourth quarter, unfortunately, the Ravens came back. So,
and then yeah, punt return. So it's not like it was crazy. So
yeah,
and in regards to this one, I am in agreement with you. I'm going with the Rams also. I'm also going to bet a little bit more. I'm putting 200 on the Rams. Like you mentioned, they're just red hot, especially on offense. Seems like they've found their rhythm and flow. And this is also just more of an indictment on the Saints because, like we've mentioned throughout the year, the Saints are just so up and down. Like one week we have like last week where it's like, okay, they have like almost, you could say, a masterclass on offense. They finally have a really efficient day from Derek Carr, and run game gets going a little bit. Granted, last week they played the Giants, so that helps. Because we know that their offense isn't doing much. It just feels like this is going to be a letdown week for the New Orleans Saints, especially on the road on a short week. And yeah, I just feel like Rams and their defense too. The LA Rams has been quietly solid, like we've mentioned, despite not having the studs that they used to. Raheem Morris doing a great job there, just stabilizing that side of it. And it's not amazing. It's not top end, but they're not a liability for the most part. So we are both extremely confident in the Rams. John putting the standard 100 on them to cover that 4.5 points, while I am putting 200 on the LA Rams to do so over the Saints. So we'll see how that one plays out. So that is the Thursday night game. Let's move on over because we do have a couple of Saturday games. Only 2 this week, so not 3, but 2. And these two teams actually played last Saturday, so they get a full 7 days. So kudos to the schedule makers for this one. For them, although not exactly the matchup we wanted because it's both starting QBs obviously out for these teams. It's going to be the Bengals, Cincinnati. They are the favorites with Jake Browning at quarterback. They are favored by 1.5 points going to Pittsburgh. Look like they have named Mason Rudolph the starter. So we'll see if that creates any sort of spark for the offense. But John, who do you have here and for how much?
I'm going with the Bengals. I don't like the quarterback shifting and changing. I know that Trubisky wasn't great. I don't really think Mason Rudolph is that much better, if better at all. I don't know. It's tough for Rudolph because the only thing that people remember him for is Myles Garrett swinging his helmet at his face. But anyway, I don't know. I don't really love it. I don't think the offense is going to be able to move the ball effectively. The Cincinnati defense has been okay. They have moments. Like certain games they look really good and other games they look kind of mediocre. I feel like this might be one where they really stand up because it's a rivalry game and they at least keep it close scoring. And just quite simply at the end of the day, I kind of trust Jake Browning and the Bengals offense right now to make things happen with Joe Mixon, with Chase Brown, with T. Higgins, and the guys that they're going to have out there. So I'm going to take Cincinnati. Pittsburgh defense also just hasn't been very inspiring as of late, which is kind of why I'm leaning the Bengals. Last week they allowed 30 points to the Colts, and that was without Michael Pittman, without Jonathan Taylor. Well, Pittman played a little bit, but he got ruled out pretty early. So at the end of the day, yeah, like I said, I don't feel that confident in really either side of the ball for Pittsburgh. But at the same time, I don't know. Pittsburgh has literally been, in the past, I felt like I had a read on them, but this year I just can't get quite a feel. So that's why I'm only going to put 10 because this game feels scary.
Yeah, it is a tough one to kind of gauge. I'm going the opposite way. I'm putting the same amount as the only putting 10, but I'm going the opposite way. I'm going Pittsburgh. It just feels like this is it for Pittsburgh. I feel like Tomlin's going to be preaching to them, and he's also, once again, somehow, some way under fire, even though they have, once again, exceeded expectations going into the season, which, so anyway, that just annoys me because, everyone's starting to clown him again, even though once again, they're down to Mason Rudolph at their quarterback. And like you mentioned, their offense has not been very good. But Bengals, like you mentioned last week, gave up some points, and worried that, especially in regards to the run game, that is one of the few things that Pittsburgh does okay, and have done pretty solidly, at least up until last week. And then also for Pittsburgh, I feel like this is going to be, once again, this is just gut feel. It's not really great, but I just feel like this is going to be a TJ Watt game where, especially last game of the season at home, where he may have a key sack or two that leads to a strip sack, and then Pittsburgh capitalizes and they get into the game that like we mentioned that they want to, or either it's close or they're ahead and their defense can just go crazy and put the pressure on your offense or the opposing team's offense. So yeah, I'm going with Pittsburgh here to it's 1.5, so it's basically probably to win unless they somehow lose by 1, which could be possible. But I'm going with Pittsburgh to complete the sweep against the Bengals because they did beat them previously in this season. Albeit, I think that was the first no Joe Burrow game for the Bengals. So, and obviously they're a much different team from then. But our first disagreement of Week 16, not a big one, as we both put 10. John going with the Bengals to cover, while I'm going with the Steelers to keep it close, or most likely pull off the upset at this point because of that spread. But anyhow, let's move on over to the other Saturday game. And it is the Buffalo Bills, fresh off their big win against Dallas. They are favored by 11.5, going to the LA Chargers. Once again, for the Chargers, it will be Easton Stick, and I don't even know the interim head coach's name. Apologies, I looked it up, but obviously no Brand Staley here. So could they get the interim head coach buff? We'll see. But John, who are you going with here, and for how much?
I'm going with Buffalo. The Chargers are bad. I'm putting 300 on the Bills. That's it. That's all I got. I mean, like the Bills, they put up 31 on Dallas. They beat the Chiefs in a tight one. They put up 34 on Philly. They put up 32 on the Jets. Like they've been scoring a lot recently. Ever since they've kind of started to feed James Cook a lot more, and it's been working. And I just don't think the Chargers are going to be able to deal with that at all. So I think Buffalo keeps rolling. They are fighting for that wild card spot and potentially even the division if they can win out. So, yeah, I'm putting 300 on the Bills.
All right, well, I agree with you. I'm only putting 50, though, on Buffalo. I am a little bit afraid of the big spread and just potential interim head coach buff, which, by the way, Chargers interim head coach is Giff Smith. So apologies to Giff. Hopefully, maybe they'll put up a fight this week. But, yeah, I expect Buffalo to blow this one out of the water. We kind of saw last week how big of a deal it is losing Justin Herbert, and on top of obviously losing Mike Williams earlier in the year. Then I'm not sure Keenan Allen's status this week, and Austin Eckler really hasn't been the same. He's since that injury earlier this season basically been banged up there. So yeah, it just feels like the Stormers right for Buffalo to kind of make this late season push and possibly make it into the playoffs via the wild card. So we'll see if they can keep doing that. And obviously for the Chargers, they're just, see what you got, I guess, towards the end of the season, see who can provide some spark going to the offseason going forward. But yeah, definitely. I don't imagine they'll get beat as bad as they would last week, but who knows? It's easily possible since we saw it literally a week ago. But anyhow, there is the Saturday games. Now let's move on to the Sunday games. Starting with the Detroit Lions. They are favored by 3.5 points going to the Minnesota Vikings. A little NFC North rivalry game here. Vikings still fighting for that playoff survival. Detroit's kind of trying to jostle for position, as I believe they have. Let me double check. I'm pretty sure they do have they're close. I think if they win this one, they basically lock up the division, so they don't have to worry about falling to the scrum of the wild card. But anyway, John, who do you have here and for how much?
I am going to take the Detroit Lions, and I'm going to put 100 on it. I just don't really believe in Minnesota, to be honest. I kind of feel like this is the point in the season where they're going to start falling away. Detroit also still jockeying for potential seeding position. The fact that both Dallas and Philly lost last week definitely opens the door where they could maybe jump up to the second seed if, things keep going their way. So I think they're going to bounce back here. And I mean, not that they need to bounce back because they beat Denver last week, but just like in terms of like getting on a roll, right? Because they had struggled against Chicago a couple weeks ago, and I think they're just going to want to keep it moving, make sure that this division is locked up nice and clean, and they can maybe possibly even take the second seed. And if the Niners start dropping games, because I mean they do play Baltimore this week, who knows? Maybe there's even a possibility they could jump up to the first seed. So I think Detroit handles their business. I'm putting 100 on them.
All right, I'm going the opposite way. I'm going with the Vikings. I'm threading the needle here because I think they'll keep this game close. ultimately believe that Detroit will win this game, but Minnesota's been a tough out. They should have won last week. They're the better team for most of the day until, kind of late where Cincinnati started making plays. And we mentioned before, like, obviously they could have been up more in the first half and maybe a different story if Nick Mullins doesn't have that terrible interception. Now, granted, very scared of that, and that could very likely happen here. But we mentioned before, Detroit's defense looking more human and suspect as the season has gone on, because outside of Aiden Hutchinson, who also he's still been good, but hasn't been making as many splash plays as he did early in this season. So, fair to question once again who else is going to help him out there in regards to that. And so I fear Minnesota is going to be able to make a couple of plays on that Detroit secondary, because we know how good that pass game still is. And I just worry about Minnesota defense. They're very aggressive. Brian Flores, he has experience against Jared Goff, so I wouldn't be shocked if he has a couple creative blitzes dialed up to that he's very confident can expose Detroit's pass protection rules and maybe force a key turnover or two, and get to Detroit and get to Goff's head. But ultimately, I think it'll be close. So I'm going with Minnesota. Give me those points, 3.5. So John going with the Detroit Lions to cover the 3.5 points, putting 100 on them, while I am going with the Minnesota Vikings to keep it within 3 and or win. I'm only putting 10, the minimum. So not much confidence for me, just because, it's scary to bet on Nick Mullins, in my opinion. So anyhow, let's move on over to the Seattle Seahawks, another one of those teams jostling for the wild card spot in the NFC. They are favored by 2.5 going to the Tennessee Titans. Unfortunately for the Titans, they are mathematically eliminated. But hey, maybe they could be playing for pride and such, as they will be at home, of course. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am going to be taking the Seattle Seahawks. The Tennessee Titans are eliminated from the playoffs, as you said. And Will Levis, potential injury. Don't know if he's going to play. Derrick Henry's been pretty miserable. Seattle gets a huge momentum winning over Philadelphia, which opens the door for them to make a potential wild card run. So these two teams are going in opposite directions. I don't really see the script flipping for either one. So I think this is a pretty easy Seattle win, honestly. So I'm putting 100 on the Seahawks.
Yeah, I'm also going with Seattle. Only putting 10 just because I'm scared of the Seattle factor. We've seen it a couple times this year where, hey, a team that's obviously less talented than they are, it's a close game. Why? And sometimes it happens because we've mentioned how simple they can be on offense. But yeah, I think ultimately, at the end of the day, they have, even if it is somewhat of a close game, I expect them to break it open at some point, or at least pull ahead comfortably, as like we mentioned, like Tennessee, just kind of a mess right now. Not a little bit of their own doing, but hey, like we knew this roster was going to be facing an uphill battle going into the season, and obviously, all that's happened. Derrick Henry may not be as effective, and D-Hop's really their only reliable receiver, and he's on the back nine of his career. So, we are in agreement. Both going with Seattle. John much more confident, putting the standard 100 on the Seahawks to cover that 2.5 point spread, and I'm only putting 10. So. Where's my money going? We'll see. Anyhow, let's go on over to a matchup that is very critical in the AFC wildcard race, as it is the Cleveland Browns. They are favored by 2.5 points going to the Houston Texans. Looking like it's going to, or they've already named Case Keenum will be the starter, as CJ Stroud ruled out with a concussion again this week for the Texans. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am going to go with the Houston Texans. I like Cleveland, but ultimately when I think about the Browns, and I was looking over their schedule because I initially just gut call felt a little torn on this game. I was thinking about Houston, and I kind of like what they've been doing, but at the same time, it's been a little bit rougher ever since the Stroud injury, which is expected. But for some reason, I just kind of felt like this game felt like one that they would come out on. And then I see it's in Houston, and then I check the schedule. Browns are 2-4 on the road. They're 7-1 at home. So I feel like this is one where they might struggle a little bit, just because apparently they're not as good on the road. I don't remember off the top of my head who they had played on the road. So it could also just be a scheduling thing, and maybe it's like they have all their tough opponents on the road. But also, I'm pretty sure they lead the league in turnovers on offense. So those two factors, not as good on the road. They lead the league in turnovers. Makes me kind of lean towards Houston. That said, I'm only putting 10 because I'm pretty sure CJ Stroud is looking like he's still not going to play. I don't know if that's confirmed, but yeah, that part worries me a little bit because I don't know. It'll put a lot of the weight back on a Devin Singletary like happened last week, and I do think that Cleveland's defense would be able to maybe solve that problem. So I'm only going to put 10, but I am taking the Texans.
Yeah, as a Stroud owner, still has not practiced as of today, Wednesday. I know he's still questionable, but they also it's just weird because they also like a day or two ago, a source or someone reported that he was already ruled out by the team. So I don't know. It seems like they're playing it safe with him. And Cleveland's lone home loss was against the Ravens week 4. That was a Dorian Thompson-Robinson start. So maybe a little bit of an asterisk next to that home loss. But nonetheless, in regards to this game, I'm going with the Browns. Case Keenum did a good job last week, but we saw they even struggled. They struggled a lot against the Texans or against the Titans, and this is literally the best defense in the league. And maybe with Nico, I'm not sure stats of Nico Collins, but even if he is back, like Browns have 2 good corners, like you mentioned last pod, and they're not afraid to play man, play zone, be creative. We know how good that pass rush is, and yeah, I don't foresee Devin Singletary having another great game. No offense to Devin, and the Texans Cleveland's just on another level right now. Although I would be worried, like you mentioned, about Browns offense turning the ball over. They've been pretty bad about that, no matter who's been in that quarterback. Even Flacco, like last week, threw 3 interceptions, almost, like we mentioned, set up 2 touchdowns for the Bears, a Bears offense that didn't do much otherwise. So that's always scary. But I feel like Joe's a vet, and Cleveland, I'm sure they're gonna get in his head like, hey Joe, just be a little bit more careful with the ball, please, because we got a great defense. You don't need to be the hero. You just got to manage the game a little bit for us. So I envision the Browns taking advantage of the situation of limiting Houston and also just bolstering their position going forward in the wild card race. And technically, we'll talk about the Ravens later. Technically, Cleveland's still in the race for potentially getting the division, although they're 2 games behind Baltimore, so unlikely. But I'm going with the Browns, and I'm putting 50 on them, so I'm a little more confident than I have been in some of these other games. While John is putting 10 on the Houston Texans to at least stay within that 2.5 point spread, or possibly pull off the upset at Houston. So we'll see if if the Cleveland Browns can do it on the road, or if you're right in regards to that. Now let's move on to Atlanta, where the Falcons are at home, and they're favored here a little bit surprisingly. It looks like it's going to be Taylor Heineke at quarterback. They are favored by 1.5, hosting the Indianapolis Colts. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm taking the Colts. They've been looking real good. The Falcons have been looking real bad. It's just kind of that simple. I think Jonathan Taylor might be coming back this week. I know that Michael Pittman was a limited participant in practice today, so he could possibly play as well. But just quite simply, I don't know. Atlanta's doing the flip-flop thing that the Jets were doing, where all of a sudden, it was Heineke, or it was Ritter, then it was the Heineke, then back to Ritter, now back to Heineke. I don't know. I think at the end of the day, Atlanta's got to realize that they got a lot of problems in the quarterback. Like they don't have the answer on the roster. And I think that Indianapolis, the way they've been playing, I expect them to keep rolling. So I'm taking the Colts for 200.
I too am in agreement. I am also taking the Colts. You mentioned that they've been rolling, and I just feel like, especially with how balanced their offense is, it's going to be tough on this Atlanta defense that has lost some pieces like Grady Jarrett on the inside. So I feel like Indy's going to have, be like you mentioned, roll on offense, keep going there. And on the flip side, even if it's Heineke, we saw last time, like when he started, there's obviously some rust with him. It's tough to just come in and start and run the offense, although albeit they'll be in Atlanta, so maybe that'll help them out. But yeah, it's one of those where I got to see Atlanta's offense, do it. I'd rather be wrong betting against them at this point, because anyone that follows the pod, anyone that plays fantasy knows like Atlanta's been a real rough team to to invest in, either in fantasy or in real life. So yeah, we are both going against fading Arthur Smith here, going with the Colts. John putting 200 on the Colts to cover that 1.5 point spread or keep it within 1.5. And I too am going with the Colts only for 10. But now let's move on over to this one will be really relatively quick, as it is the New York Jets. They are at home, favored by 2.5 points, hosting the Washington Commanders. Both these, Jets mathematically eliminated. I'm pretty sure Washington is too. Yeah, both these teams mathematically eliminated. They're just playing for pride at this point. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm taking the Jets. The current rankings, the Jets are the worst offense in the league, and Washington is the worst defense in the league. So if there's any game in which I think that, the Jets could actually be able to move the ball, I think it might be this one. So for that reason, I'm taking the Jets. Also, Washington's a little bit turnover prone. Offensive line isn't great, so the defense could be solid. Once again, they had a pretty embarrassing loss to Miami. And I can't remember the last time they played and lost to Miami. The Jets did not cover the following week. Okay, so I was going to say they were going to bounce back, but they didn't do it last time, so I don't know. Maybe they want to right the ship this time. Regardless, I don't know. This could just be me not believing in Washington, because that 32nd ranked defense, it just, I don't know. It makes it tough for me to really believe that they're going to be able to come out on top here. So I'm taking the Jets for 100.
That's tough. Important to note is that Zach Wilson's still in concussion protocol as of today, Wednesday. We're recording, so
yeah,
we may see Trevor Siemian again out there. Regardless, I know Washington not great on defense. I just feel like I mentioned this last pod how simple the Jets defense can be on their own, but obviously they're way more talented. I just feel like this is going to be kind of a get right game for Washington, kind of a pride win. And I think that their offense, I just trust their offense more, even though they are going up against a tougher matchup. While on the flip side, especially if it's Trevor Siemian, I don't have much trust. Jets can't really run the ball anyway, and kind of exposed. Especially, we mentioned Washington's. Now that they lost their edge rushers, that's a good place to expose them. I just don't think the Jets will be able to take as an advantage of that poor defense as much as Washington will be able to, find ways to move the ball on their end. So. I'm going with the Commanders, only putting 10, because I am scared of the Jets, of Sam Howell or whoever. If Jacoby Brissett gets thrown in there, I'm just afraid of a pick six or something, and I won't be shocked if they do lose, but keep it close here. So we'll see what happens. Another disagreement for John and myself over this rather meaningless game, but hey, it'll have some meaning to us, as John put 100 on the New York Jets to cover that 2.5 points, while I put 10 on the Commanders to keep it within 2 and or win. So there is that one. Now let's move on over to my Green Bay Packers. They are the favorites. They are favored by 4.5 points against the Carolina Panthers in Carolina. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I have had the occasional Carolina pick throughout the year, and I don't think it's ever worked for me. Like the games that they actually finally do it, I didn't believe, but I'm not making the mistake again, because more often than not, picking against them is the right call. So short and simple, I'm taking the Packers. I'm going to put 50 on it. That's it.
Yeah, I agree. And once again, I know I'm a Packer fan, but I think you agree when I say this. Just trust the Packers, especially on offense, a little bit more to make plays. Like Carolina, like last week, they struggled.
They suck.
Like all their drives, they are. Right now, they just lack explosiveness on offense in any sort of form or fashion. Like, I don't think I've seen all their drives are like 17, 15, played 80-yard drives that end up in a field goal if they do score. So, it's as much as I've had criticism of the Packers defense and such, I you expect the Packers to take care of business here, especially with still some hope, to get into that wild card spot, as they're still, in that scrum within those teams, but obviously on the outside looking in. So we're both putting 50 on the Packers to cover the 4.5 point spread. So hopefully they do for me. Now let's move on over to Tampa Bay, the team that beat the Packers last week, and they've been on a hot streak. The the Bucs are at home in Tampa. They are favored by 1.5 points, hosting the Jacksonville Jaguars. A little mini battle for Florida here. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am going to be going with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Although they have been struggling a lot recently, and there's a lot of concerns about Jacksonville, I do think that they might start to feel the pressure of the potential division, Indianapolis and Houston maybe catching up, and I think they'll respond because I do think they're a good team. Although Tampa has been looking good offensively as of late, I can't ignore the fact that Tampa has been kind of inconsistent on the whole year, and the defense doesn't feel like it is what it once was. So I'm going to go with Jacksonville to not only cover, but also win. But at the same time, I'm only going to put 10 because I think that Trevor Lawrence is potentially going to miss the game due to concussion protocol. So we'll see. So yeah, only 10, but I'm picking the Jags.
All right. I made my pick without even assuming Lawrence will play, which means I'm going with the Bucs for 10. I just feel like they've been riding hot, especially on offense. I feel like they've gotten the pass game going. They've been leaning more on that, and then finding different ways to use Rachaad White, and obviously last week Chris Godwin got involved, which is always great to see. And Mike Evans is still a force, and also like Jags defense last week was better, but they've kind of fallen off the past 2 weeks too. We've been concerned about their offense, which has as well, but their defense too has been suspect recently to giving up some large plays, big points, and such. So yeah, just especially with the questions around Lawrence, and then their line still isn't great, and Tampa's still good at defending the run. So I just feel like it's gonna be another tough game where ETN, at least on the ground, doesn't get much going. So it's gonna lean more on the pass game. And as we saw kind of last week, like pass game is still lacking in Jacksonville, especially in regards to explosive plays and creative ideas. So I'm going with the Bucs. I'm only putting 10 though, because like John mentioned, the Bucs are inconsistent on both throughout the season. So this could be, I'm just afraid of that. This will be the time where they lay the egg against the Jaguars.
Yeah, where Baker just throws like 3 picks or something.
Yeah, or their defense lets up 40 points, and Trevor Lawrence just has a great day, even though he didn't practice most of the week. Just
right,
one of those times. So another difference between the both of us, where we only put 10 on each side. So we'll see how that one plays out. But that actually may be a solid game, although who knows? Florida may happen in that game, and that may be a gross one. Anyhow, a game that shouldn't be gross and should be high flying, fast, and exciting is this next one, as it is also in Florida. It's in Miami. The Miami Dolphins obviously are the favorites here. They are favored by 1.5, hosting your Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, a big game for both these teams. Both are trying to jostle for the 1 seed / in your case, your own division. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I am going to be going with the Cowboys. I will say the one thing that worries me about this game is the potential run game for Miami and that getting going, because Jonathan Hankins, I don't think, has been cleared yet. Also, same thing goes for Zach Martin and Tyron Smith on the offensive line. Tyron did play last week through the whole game, but he is questionable, and he's missed a lot of time throughout his career. And then Zach Martin did miss 3/4 of last week, and he has not been cleared yet. I expect at least the 2 offensive linemen to play. Hankins, I don't know. But that said, I do feel like both teams are kind of in a unique situation in which everybody kind of is questioning if they're true contenders, right? Miami still, to this point, has not beaten a team with a winning record. Dallas, they did answer that call by beating Seattle and by beating Philly, so they've done it. But still, the blowout against Buffalo has brought back a lot of question marks. And I feel like Dan Quinn is not an idiot. I think that Dan Quinn knows that if he allows this defense to get torched by the run 2 weeks in a row, that it is opening up a blueprint for basically any team not named San Francisco, because the Niners already know they can do that, but anybody else they might play in the playoffs to try and do this and view this as a true weakness that they can hold over them and use to exploit. So I think that there's probably going to be extra attention to it. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot more Micah Parsons playing at linebacker in this game as opposed to purely as an edge rusher. And I still don't know the status of Tyreek Hill. And ultimately, I just think that Dallas is due for a bounce back to where, I mean, to use what you said last week, where you were talking about, well, Dallas is coming off a win. They might be a little more complacent. Miami might be in the same situation where they just blew out the Jets. They're riding high right now. I don't know. Maybe they could get caught off guard here. So, yeah, I'm going to take the Cowboys for 100.
Alrighty. Well, I'm also taking the Cowboys here. I'm only putting 10, though, because I'm much more scared in regards to this. Because, yeah, I mean, it will be interesting to see if Dallas can bounce back. You mentioned in regards to defending the run game. We know how good Miami is and setting that up for those two backs, especially receiving-wise, too. Because you mentioned last episode or last podcast that James Cook that's one thing they were able to exploit was getting James Cook on linebackers and beating them down the field, and we know that Devon Achane and Raheem Mostert can do some of those things as well. So that is scary, but yeah, I would expect your defense to respond in a better fashion and come out more ready in this one, and we know that is a weakness of Miami is their offensive line. And Dallas, I would assume, going to have some creative ways to slow down those receivers on the outside, make Tua pat the ball a little bit more, hold on to the ball a bit longer. And we know, especially with the poor offensive line, bad, or good things can happen for Dallas, bad things for Miami if the longer that he has to hold on to it and make decisions there. So I just feel like, I'm with you. I think this is a get right game for Dallas. I think they'll have a proper approach on offense. The offense wasn't great last week either. I won't be shocked if they're more patient with the run game here or find more creative ways to do that. Kind of like I did with Philly. It's just one of those odd things where they went from, we were talking about how great the shifts were against Philadelphia, then we didn't see much of that against Buffalo, have much of an effect. So we'll see. I assume that they correct the ship. And yeah, like you mentioned, a little bit of the opposite momentum going here where Miami could be complacent, Dallas, back feeling the heat of the fire again that they were riding a few weeks ago. So both going the Cowboys. John going with the standard 100 on the Dallas Cowboys to keep it within a point and or win. Well, I am putting 10 on them because I'm much more hesitant in regards to this one, but should be a good game nonetheless. I'm knocking on wood too because I feel like every time I say that, it's a one-sided affair. Anyhow, now let's move on to another game where not many implications. So this one will be probably really quick from us, as it's the Chicago Bears at Chicago, favored by 4.5, hosting the Arizona Cardinals. Both teams here also mathematically eliminated. So Chicago isn't technically eliminated, but they need a lot of help. So anyway, your thoughts, John?
I am going to be going with Arizona. Chicago, I don't know. The 4.5 feels big for Chicago. And I know that they have had some solid performances against like Detroit and all these different teams, but I don't know. Arizona and Chicago kind of feel similar to me in that, like, I like the QBs. I don't necessarily love everything else. And yeah, so I'm taking Arizona. I'm putting 100 on it. Just simply put, I don't know if Chicago has it in them to win by more than a field goal.
Yeah, this is a tough one to gauge, like you mentioned. I'm going with the Bears. I'm going the opposite side. I'm only putting 20 on them. I just feel like I have more trust in the Bears' style, especially if it's going to be in Chicago, poor weather. If they have to run the ball with Fields and the read option game, obviously we know they can do that. And then on the flip side, their defense, I have a little more faith in than Arizona's, and especially in regards to, like I said, a game like this where size is going to be more crucial than speed. I feel like, and we've mentioned too that, and you mentioned it very well last week, how Arizona, the wide receivers just haven't really been getting involved recently. And so I just think that's advantage Bears, and I expect for them to kind of take care of business like Justin Fields still has in the Bears. I mean, technically Kyler does too. That's what the interesting part is. Both these quarterbacks, especially more so Fields now, but we remember in the summer people were already talking about how they're going to get rid of Kyler for whoever, and who knows, maybe they still do. So maybe both these quarterbacks still could be putting it all out to audition and keep their starting job in the current city. But I just have more trust in the Bears roster as a whole. But my 20 does not say so, but that's because it's, I don't know, like you mentioned, like both these teams are very similar, so very hard to fully trust either one of them in my opinion. So, or in both of our opinions. So I'm going with Chicago, the favorite, to cover that 4.5 points. I'm only putting 20, so that shows my confidence level. While John is going with the Cardinals to at least keep it within 4 or win outright, which they could possibly do because, like you mentioned, both these teams in that lower area of the NFC to put nicely. But anyhow, let's move on over to last, probably least, as this one may be it's New Year's Eve. People may, or not New Year's, Christmas Eve. Some people may decide to go to bed early and such. In regards to this one, who knows? But it's the Denver Broncos at Denver, favored by 6.5, hosting the New England Patriots. Patriots out of the discussion, so who knows what they're playing for. But John, who do you have here, and for how much?
I'm going to the Patriots. I don't know. This kind of just a flip of the coin thing. I don't really like Denver. I like Denver, but I don't feel like. I mean, well, hold on. Let me look this up because I could be wrong. I'm going to stick with my pick, but just before I say what I'm about to say, I don't want to be ignorant here. I just don't feel like they really pull away from teams whenever they typically win. Like, all right, so looking at their schedule, they got blown up by the Lions last week. They beat the Chargers 24-7, but it's the Chargers. Close game against the Texans. They did pull away against the Browns. Close game against the Vikings. Close game against the Bills. Close game against the Packers. A lot of their wins just kind of feel close. So a 3-point win against the Bears earlier in the season. Literally, I think they only have even some of their losses. Like they lost by 2 to the Commanders in week 2. They lost by 1 to the Raiders to open the season. I think only their win against the Chiefs, their win against the Browns, I think those, and their win against the Chargers. Those are the only 3 wins they had where it was more than like a field goal. So yeah, I don't know. The 6.5 just kind of gut call felt big, and now looking at that, I feel a little bit more confident because yeah, they just play a lot of close games, and New England, I don't know. Although they're not great, they're still at least trying. So yeah, I mean, even though I make all the jokes about them taking, they're trying. So yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm going. I'll keep this short. I'm going the opposite way. I think I mentioned how I feel like Denver's defense is good at taking away one thing and being opportunistic. We know New England's offense is terrible. I smell a Bailey Zappi interception or fumble that pushes us to a 2-possession game, and that's kind of all she wrote. Because like we mentioned before, no one just scares you in New England skill position wise, wide receiver, running back, even tight end. Sorry, Hunter Henry, but you're on the back 9, and it also doesn't help they have Bailey Zappi at quarterback. And yeah, I just feel like on the flip side, especially in regards to last week, I'm hoping that this is a Javonte Williams week, but I feel like we've said that, at least between ourselves, like every week
listen,
we both have investments in him. But also New England's I will say New England defense tough to run against too. So it's like, man, like this could just be, like I said, an ugly game. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, man, listen, I've been waiting for Javonte Williams weeks forever, and like there's like 1 or 2, but I don't know. I'm benching him this week if Jonathan Taylor plays.
Yeah, so there you go. But I think Denver takes care of business. They still have a lot to play for. New England doesn't, and not much that even can excite you really for New England. So I'm going 50 on the Broncos to cover that 6.5 point spread. John only putting 10 on New England to keep it within 6. So not our biggest difference here, but another one for us. So that is the Sunday night games. Hopefully y'all enjoy that. Going into Monday, where we have a couple games on Christmas Day, starting with the Kansas City Chiefs. They are favored by 9.5 points, hosting the Las Vegas Raiders. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm going to be going with the Kansas City Chiefs, and I'm putting 300 on them. Just short and simple. I think the Chiefs got a lot to play for because, they've had an unfortunate last month with a couple of tough losses. They proved me right last week against the Patriots, and I think they continue to roll against the Raiders. And I also think the Raiders maybe come back down to earth after their monster performance against the Chargers. That kind of feels like a game where they let it all out, and now they go back to sucking. So, yeah, I'm putting 300 on the Chiefs.
All right, we are in disagreement. I do think the Chiefs win. I do want to preface that I'm not predicting any sort of upset here, but I think the Raiders will at least keep it somewhat close. And I do like that how their defense has been playing as of recently. We know this Chiefs offense has been lesser than previous years or even its usual standard. So I just feel like they'll keep it close there. And I actually feel like, the offense explosion may help, at least at first, maybe have some confidence in the first couple of drives or in some couple of moments. But yeah, nonetheless, I expect Kansas City to win, but I'm throwing the needle here with the loss by picking the Las Vegas Raiders to keep it within 9. Basically, I'm only putting 10 though, so that shows you my confidence level again in regards to this. While John is putting 300 on the Chiefs to cover the 9.5 point spread at Kansas City too, so that could be a very good factor. So we'll see if the big bet pays off for John. Now let's move on to a NFC East matchup here, which is the Philadelphia Eagles. They're at Philadelphia, favored by 11.5, hosting the New York Giants. Who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm taking the Giants. I'm putting 10 on it. I think the Eagles win, but I'm kind of doing similar to what you did with the Raiders, where I'm kind of sneaking in. I feel like the Eagles, they lose 3 straight. They're going to want to correct a lot of things, but at the same time, defense is a little bit in flux. Jalen Hurts has been turning the ball over. I don't know. I just feel like there could be some room here where maybe like the Eagles win by 10, maybe a little backdoor cover or something like that. So I'm taking the Giants, but I don't feel confident in them, whatever, because I do think that the Eagles will win this game. I think their losing streak is going to come to an end, although I hope it continues. But I think it's going to come to an end here. But like I said, threading the needle, but only putting 10.
Yeah. I'm going with Philly. I'm putting 150 on them. I'm mainly betting on the bounce back here, and especially against a Giants offense that has kind of come to earth. Yeah, I know Tommy DeVito had some solid games, but I think we see once they play talented opponents, it gets tough, especially on both sides of the ball. I'll be shocked if Philly's more patient with the run game or has more ideas, some more creativity, get that pass game going again. Because like we mentioned, this is it. Like, this is a great time to start incorporating those ideas, trying some stuff out, expanding your game before you head into the playoffs. And also, not to mention the fact that they really do, probably want that 1 seed, want everyone to go through Philly, want that extra week probably to help prepare, for those type of things. So I feel like Philadelphia going to want to right the ship. And yeah, Giants are, I know they're technically not eliminated from the playoff picture.
They play Philly twice though, man. Like that's
so yeah, that's why I'm like, it's uphill battle for them, especially in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
After a tough loss, I feel like Philly's going to respond here in a passionate way. So I'm putting 150 on the Eagles to cover that 11.5 points, while John putting 10 on the Giants to keep it within 11 or less. So very likely we'll see if they can provide that kind of little Christmas miracle for John. Although, like I said, you only put in 10, but hey, I'll be losing 150, so that'd be big. But anyhow, let's move on over to the last, but definitely not least game of the week, as this, I would say, is the game of the week. But
definitely,
as literally, let me double check. Pretty sure they're both at the top of. Yep,
yeah.
So technically, the two best teams in each conference. Yep. As of right now, it is the San Francisco 49ers. It's going to be in San Francisco. They are favored by 5.5 points, hosting the Baltimore Ravens. Like we just mentioned, battle of the 1 seeds for each conference. So who do you have here, John, and for how much?
I'm going to go with Baltimore for 100. I just think there's like a mentality difference for the two teams. Obviously, they both want to secure the 1 seed, but San Francisco can afford to lose a game, and they still hold the tiebreaker over both Philly and Dallas, who are right behind them. And I don't think that Detroit's going to catch up. So I don't think that, obviously, I think they're going to go out there and they want to win and they're going to be locked in. But I just don't think they're going to have the same desperation that Baltimore might have, because the Ravens, they're in the thick of it. The AFC is definitely a battle. Them, the Dolphins, which they will know if the Dolphins have beaten Dallas by this point. So that's beneficial for Baltimore. But them, the Dolphins, the Chiefs, like there's still a fight for that 1 seed that is happening. And quite frankly, I don't know if Baltimore is even technically locked up the division yet. Like Cleveland's still in that race too. So I think that Baltimore might just come out a little bit different here. I don't know if they win, but I certainly think that they can at least keep it close, keep it within a field goal, because their defense, I think, is really solid and might be the toughest defense that San Francisco has played all season. So yeah, we will see. I definitely think it's going to be a really good game. And so I'm going to put 100 on the Ravens.
All right. Well, you've been doing math. you should probably know that this is my big bet. And this is a definitely risky one because it's the best game. But I feel like Niners are just on a roll, and
They've been blowing
basically I'm
out good
putting
teams too.
yeah. And so if you've been doing the math, I have 950 left, so I'm putting 950 on the Niners to cover the spread at home. While Baltimore's defense has been great, I have a couple of concerns. Is they're not very great at getting a pass rush on their own, especially with their front four, and I feel like that's just not great against the Niners. And also, they don't really run a lot of man, so I just feel like Kyle Shanahan's going to find ways to expose their zones, and I don't want to be shocked if he cracks the code and finds ways to run the ball on the Ravens and just make life hard on them on that side of the ball. On the flip side, Baltimore's offense has been good, but losing Keaton Mitchell does hurt, and the run game has already been, it's still above average, but has not been elite as it can be, and especially against a really good Niners fronts. I feel like they're gonna be able to slow down Lamar and the gang, and they do creative things, putting multiple guys in the box, showing them different looks, and but I'm just still not as confident in the Baltimore passing game in regards to consistency, especially against the 49ers and such. So I think Niners take advantage of the situation and try to get ahead on this race, so that maybe they get 2 weeks off, or I don't know how they will do it, but you know what I mean. I think they want to try to lock in that 1 seed as much as possible, so that the NFC runs through them, especially reminiscent of last year when that game was in Philly, right? Or was that in San Francisco? I think the NFC championship.
That was in Philly.
Yeah. Okay. So
Philly was the 1 seed, and San Francisco was the 2 seed.
Yeah. So I feel like that's definitely gonna be a point of emphasis for them and such. So I'm betting big on the Niners. I know, and probably the biggest game of the weekend. But I just have more confidence in them on both sides of the ball, especially offensively, and it's an offensive-driven league. And as we know, they have you can really see it. They should have more stars in regards to that right now at skill position. Ayuk, Debo, and McCaffrey and Kittle, and obviously Purdy's been doing really great in their lines, and they're healthy. That's the biggest thing. San Francisco's healthy, while Baltimore potentially dealing with some injuries right now too, like Staley dealing with concussion. So who knows, if he'll be able to go this week. And I know a couple of their key.
Mark Andrews has been out, so
yeah. Although we'll say, why Blake
Isaiah Likely
been stepping up, but Odell and Zay Flowers didn't have the greatest week last week, so we'll see if they can bounce back, or this will be another tough week for them in the office. Statistically, I know they got the win, so that's all that matters. But we'll see. This is definitely our biggest difference money wise. I think that's 950 is the biggest bet. This was a tough week, and I'm following the trend of I'm putting the money on the team I trust the most at that current time, especially against their matchup. So I feel like we'll see. At this point, my season's already on the line. Like, I'm already in desperation mode. So this was like, and once again, I made my bets before John even did his. It's not like I was trying to hedge because do that. I put 950 on this beforehand. I'm riding high. If the Niners burn me, against the Ravens, so be it. Like, at least, I'm pretty sure that will pretty much do it for me money wise. But I watch, ironically, me too. I go like 15-1, and this is the game I lose. And it's just that puts the nail in the coffin. But anyhow, those are our picks and bets for Week 16 of the NFL season against the spread. Anything else you want to mention or throw in before we call it there?
It's going to be interesting, man. With the playoffs, there's a whole lot of tiebreakers that are all of a sudden being calculated with all these wild card teams, and it's going to be interesting because this is, for a lot of teams, this is kind of the make or break moment. Like teams like the Rams, the Seahawks, the Steelers, like these kind of teams that are like on the bubble. This is a big stretch of 3 games that we're going into.
Yeah, like especially this week, a couple of them play against each other, so it's already like some teams already need to be in like playoff win or go home mode.
Right.
Like my Packers, like you mentioned, like the teams you just mentioned, like
Houston, Cleveland, Indianapolis, Atlanta, because they're fighting for the division. It's a big week.
Yeah, so very interesting, and we have plenty of football as they're spread across 4 days and such. So for John and myself, that will pretty much do it. As always, feel free to rate, review, subscribe, and comment and such. if you are, celebrating any holidays this weekend, like Christmas, for example, if you enjoy that, be safe, everyone. But otherwise, we will see you all next week. Hopefully, we are both, John, this becomes more of a competition money-wise. If not, at least maybe I'll keep it within record. Hopefully, too, we're back here next week and we're both, going to be facing off in our fantasy championship.
Yeah,
very sad.
I mean,
it's just
you'd get your shot at revenge after the Survivor Series.
Yes, sir. That'd be great. And obviously, you want to win the whole enchilada. But anyhow,